Albert Mugo, CEO and MD of KenGen Kenya. It's a pleasure to be speaking to you again, Albert, as we always do on these big occasions. Congratulations on the results, but I just wanted to first ask you a couple of questions which are out there. PIC, the Public Investment Corporation of South Africa, I saw an announcement 2 weeks ago that you're going to allocate some of the leftover rights issue shares to them. Do you want to just touch on what's happening there so we can understand?
Yeah, okay. So, you're quite right. We made an announcement, a disclosure in the papers 2 weeks ago about the PIC of South Africa. And what is happening is when we're doing the rights issue, that institution expressed interest in buying the shares. Of course, we're not shareholders, so they couldn't take on the rights, but they were interested that in case there was any leftover shares, they would take it up so that we can complete the rights issue. Unfortunately, they were not able to get the prerequisite approvals on time by the time we were closing on 30th June. But even after 30th of June, we kept interacting with them, and they did explain that they were very, very keen and very interested, and that they were ready to take those shares at the price of the rights issue. So we continued engaging with them, and finally they were able to get the approvals that were needed, and we more or less now closed the deal. And where we are now is to get the approvals from the regulators here in Kenya.
Is that the only thing that's
the only thing that's really left?
The moment you get that,
and then once we get that, they'll be able to take their 351 million shares, and we'll be able to get cash of 2.4 billion Kenya shillings. And in a sense, then we'll be able to say that the rights issue has been fully subscribed, and the government shareholding will drop down from the current 73 point something back to 70%.
Congratulations on that, Albert, because first of all, it's very Pan-African, so that's a good thing, and this is a really serious, stable, long-term shareholder. I think so. Really well done on that.
Okay, thank you.
And I think what I wanted to point out to you, there's been some heavy trading volumes in KenGen this year,
and we're happy about that.
Much higher than previously. So there's somebody there who's mopping it all up, as I'm seeing. Albert, your chairman, before I get to the results, called the dividend the elephant in the room.
Yes.
Now, I remember at the last results, you spoke through this issue of compensating tax, which made it very expensive for KenGen to actually pay the dividend. I just wanted to ask you, obviously, from what I could hear, the board is appraised of the situation. Are you looking at all kinds of options? Where would you say Albert Mugo is right now on this dividend issue?
Okay, what we are doing, first of all, we have engaged with the government, both our ministry and the National Treasury, about the whole issue of compensating tax, because yes, it does make it very, very difficult for us, because when you give the dividend and then there's compensating tax you're meant to pay, it then means you've got quite a big outflow of cash that you could have used towards the projects that we're doing. When we paid the government dividend of about 5.7 last year, it triggered a 2.4 billion, compensating tax. So you can see it's quite a big burden to us. However, we've been talking to government, particularly about the 2.4 billion compensating tax, and we could say that there are positive signs that they may ask KRA to abandon that, which would then help us to have that money to put back to the projects. But in terms of the dividend, let me say earlier that we do recognize that people have invested in KenGen with good reason.
Yes.
I'm actually a shareholder in KenGen myself.
And myself.
and naturally, you want to be able to get some return. And so what we say is that we do think very seriously about the shareholders. We look at those who have invested long term, who would want to grow the company so that we increase the capacity, and then you get to a point where you can start harvesting where you've been sowing. But we also know that there are some shareholders who have put in some money for the short term, and therefore the dividend means quite a lot to them. So we have not closed any options, and the board will be looking at this. And as the year goes on, we now have a few months to June 30th. They'll be looking at it positively, keeping the interests of the shareholders at heart. Yes.
Excellent. Oh, that's good to hear. Albert, looking at the results, I just wanted to touch on a few things. Electricity revenue was the same.
Yes.
But we saw a reduction in earnings.
Yes.
Now, when I was analysing it, it seemed to me that there were some operational challenges and a couple of non-repeats. You collected a lot of arrears the previous year, which obviously you were not going to collect again. Then I noticed you had some wellhead challenges. Do you want to just characterise what happened there for us?
Okay. Yeah, so Ali, you're quite right that our result, if somebody looks at it and it's not explained, it can appear like, we're really going down. But the fact of the matter is that we've done quite well, and you're right. The electricity revenue was more or less constant between half year 2016 and half year 2017. And the difference we are seeing in the results has to do largely with some non-electricity revenue that we had received in the first of 2016 that, of course, was not repeated this time. And one of them, the major one really, was the steam sales. And how that came up is the fact that in 2016, we did receive quite a big amount of steam sales, which pertained part of it to the previous year.
Yes.
And because the accounts were not restated, that income was shown as coming in 2016. But when you then now look at the steam sales, rightly with an adjustment for the arrears, it is for 2016 and 2017 is about the same. And therefore, there's not really a major issue there that, we did badly. It's just that there was arrears that belonged to the other year. Of course, in terms of the operations, there was one or two challenges that we had. One of them was the fact that there was a constraint in the transmission. And so the wellheads, which are based on energy, which we sell depending on how we generate into the grid, had slightly lower sales than what we should have had. And so that had an effect of reducing the sales in that. But what I can say is that that constraint has since been addressed. And in the second half of the 2017 year, we expect to see, a better comparison with the second half of 2016. And so going forward, the differences should not be that much.
Because actually, before you had your briefing, I was speaking to your chief financial officer, and he was mentioning that there was a significant pickup Q2 versus Q1.
Yes.
So you're basing the improvement upon what you've already seen.
Exactly.
I think.
Yes, what we've already seen.
And from the just one quick question: when you say steam, what do you mean? But what's the difference between steam and electricity?
Okay. Now, what has happened to us is that when you generate using geothermal. Okay, first of all, let me explain how we sell our power. Our power purchase agreements have what we call the capacity payment. Now, the capacity payment has to do with the fact that your generator is available for Kenya Power to use it to generate electricity. To the extent that we make our power plant available, we receive all the money associated with that capacity payment. It's only if we do not make it available that we may not receive everything. Second, there is what you call energy payments, which are related to the amount of energy that you generate. And so this meets the variable, so to speak, variable O&M cost, like the lubrication and the things that have to do with the fact that it's happening as you move. Like the way when a car moves, every kilometer you move,
Yes.
You pay for that, despite the fact that you've paid a rental charge for that car for that day. Then the final one has to do with fuel. And as you know, in this country, fuel is a pass-through cost to the consumers of electricity. Now, in the case of geothermal, the fuel is the steam. And we have two elements of that. There is steam that GDC has responsibility for because they're the ones who drilled the well. So they produce that steam, and that cost of the steam is charged to the users of electricity. But because that steam is being generated in an area where KenGen has a license, we are the ones who manage the steam production. So when you look at it, there is what we call the steam sales.
Okay.
That is what would come to GDC. And then another line there, we call it steam cost. And that is what KenGen now charges GDC for managing, that resource. And that comes to us as revenue. That's one element of it. The other element is the fact that in the same field, we have wells that were drilled by KenGen. And that one then, that steam, that fuel cost, that's money that's coming directly to us because that does not belong to GDC. So that's why we are having steam sales. It is the fuel that help produce electricity, and as a pass-through cost, then it comes to us.
Now, we've suffered a terrible drought. I mean, I was flying from Kwale to Nairobi at a low level, and it was dry.
Yes.
Not a single river. But you've made this huge move into geothermal. How badly does the drought, and how much is hydropower now as a percentage of your mix, and how badly is this drought going to impact you?
Okay. First of all, let me say that it's true that the drought has been very, very bad. And the dam levels are quite low. As a matter of fact, the Masinga Dam, which is the main dam for what we call the Seven Forks power plants, 5 of them in Cascade, producing close to 600 megawatts. That one, the full supply level is 1056.5 meters above sea level. And currently, we are at 1042.3 meters as of this morning.
Wow.
And the minimum operating level is about 1037 meters. So we have 5 meters.
So, and that's close, I suppose.
And that is close. What we have done, and this is ourselves, the Minister of Energy and Petroleum, together with Kenya Power, and ERC actually, because this has to be looked in a wholesome way. The reservoirs are ours. Kenya Power is the one that dispatches the plants. They're the ones who decide which plants to run. So we work together and we agree we have this amount of water. We need to use it carefully so that it takes us right up to the time we're expecting the next rains. So we tell them this is the amount of energy you can extract from the hydros for this period of time. And so we exchange this information and we keep reviewing it and looking at it.
So you're micromanaging.
We are actually managing that,
Yes.
and we're managing it very well. And what we have done is that we have been able to find that because there is enough generation mix in Kenya, we have got this hydro, we have got geothermal, and we even have thermal. So currently, geothermal is producing about 47% of
Yes.
all the electricity that is used in the country.
Wow. And that's happened in a relatively short time.
In a very short time,
Yeah.
because particularly once we brought in the 280 megawatts plus another 80 megawatts of well-head units in the last 2 years, that has made a lot of impact. Then the hydro currently is standing at about 35-36%. Okay, and then the balance of about 15% is coming from the thermal. So that's how we are managing this situation. And I keep saying that previously, when we had drought of this magnitude, would have been power rationing.
Yes.
Because the hydro cannot support the energy that the country demands. But for the first time now with this kind of drought, we are happy. And we think that the water we have will take us to the next rains. And when we get the next rains, we replenish the reservoir and things will come to normal. The hydro generation will be stepped up a bit, and maybe a bit of reduction now from the thermal, because the geothermal is running flat out.
When you look forward, and everyone's very excited about renewable energy.
Yes.
Obviously, geothermal is the big push from your side.
Yes.
You also mentioned in there that you haven't done any solar, but you're looking at solar. We got the Lake Turkana wind power. Does hydrology continue to fall as a percentage of the total mix, or are we now where it will be?
Okay, so it is true that, at one time in Kenya, hydro was about 80% of the entire generation capacity.
So the whole economy would have stopped by now.
The whole economy would have stopped by now. And actually the economy did stop in the year 2001.
Yes.
When the hydro levels were so bad and the industries were getting power 3 days in a week. I mean,
that was 2001.
Yes, that was terrible. So it's true that hydro at one point in Kenya was dominant, but gradually we have made the hydro not become so prominent. And if you look at the plants that we have and that are there even with other power producers, we're not seeing too many hydro power plants coming in. So you're quite right that hydro will reduce in relation to the other sources of generation. The wind is coming in.
Yes.
More geothermal is coming in. And as I said, this far, we do not have any grid solar connected, in this country. And I believe part of that is because the cost has been a bit high. But we understand that the cost of solar has been coming down. And with costs coming down, there's no reason for solar plant now not to start coming in the way it's happening in other parts of the world. As a matter of fact, KenGen is just about to commence a study on some small solar plant of about 10 megawatts next to our hydro plant, because we have got land. The sun there is not too bad. So we have a small financing we got from the USTDA for carrying out a quick study, and I believe that should point out to the direction to take Chuon Solar. And then when you look at our plans going forward, they're dominated largely by geothermal and quite a bit of wind, and no hydro at all.
Yes.
So yes, hydro will keep to come down, and that will help manage this risk of drought that keeps threatening the country from time to time.
Some weeks ago, I was reading that there were concerns that we're adding on too much power to the grid versus the demand curve.
Yes.
And I think that was an issue that was kind of being raised in there as well. Are you worried about that?
No, I'm not worried about this, Ali, because for one main reason, for a very long time, Kenya has been a country where there was electricity capacity deficit. And with any little disturbance, even losing one of the units in a power plant, it would resort to power rationing. So now, if you look at world over, in the developed countries, the reserve margin, which means the capacity above the demand at peak time, is in the tune of over 30%.
This is across emerging markets or developed markets?
Developed markets.
Developed markets.
In the emerging markets, you would typically be comfortably about 25%, 25 to 30%. Now, so for Kenya, two things is the fact that, number one, it's really been very difficult to know what is our real demand. Because when we did not have enough generation, there are very many people that shied off from investing in Kenya because they say, oh, there's not enough power, so why should we put up a factory there, and what are we going to do? So we believe that, first of all, by providing enough power, you could actually make some of the people or industrialists change their minds and come and do some investment in Kenya. And so this capacity, which is seen as excess, could be taken up very quickly before we know it. So I think it's important that we keep way ahead of demand and give confidence to investors so that they can know that even if they put up their power plants, it will not be interrupted because there's not enough capacity. Secondly, you will find that if you look at the Vision 2030 plan, there are a number of projects there which have not quite taken off, but which eventually we are seeing one by one they're coming in. And even in the 2030 vision document, there's some areas like steel or iron ore smelting, which I think up to now has not quite come in, but in my mind I can see that there will come a time when like these steel mills will start producing, and they're big consumers of electricity. Now you don't, because power plants take quite a long time to build, more than it takes to build a factory.
Yes.
You don't want to get to that situation where people build the factory and then you think, oh, okay, you have to wait for the time that will finish your power. So I think the strategy that the government has in keeping well ahead of demand with the capacity to supply that demand, I think is a very good idea. And it's in that strategy that KenGen is keeping focused on the pipeline of projects that we have for the next 5 years.
Staying with that theme, if you look at things like the railway now is finally nearly ready.
Yes.
It's going to pull down to Naivasha.
Yes.
You've got your geothermal there. You had this idea of an industrial park.
Yes.
We're seeing Ethiopia, our neighbors, doing a lot of these industrial parks. Is that still a big part of your plan?
Yeah, that's still a big part of our plan. As a matter of fact, we've now completed a feasibility study. And with the feasibility study, what we're basically doing was to study the site so that we could identify a proper site where this industrial park can be situated, where it is easy to provide electricity, where it's easy to provide steam, and where it's easy to access either by road or, having a railway line to connect to the standard gauge railway line. And in connection with that, we've had discussions and interactions with the Ministry of Trade and Industrialization. We've had a number of trips to Okaria with the teams from the Ministry of Trade and also the EPZ, because we see this as an area that will need collaboration, because the ministry is marketing out there what the country can provide big time. And on our side here, we are saying, yeah, you come in, we'll give you power, we'll give you steam. So we are working together, and we see it as an area. Yes, it's a bit slow because it's the first time we're doing it, but I think when it picks up fully, it would be a really great opportunity for us.
2 final questions. Albert, what's the biggest challenge for you right now?
I think, okay, as you know, the biggest challenge, the power projects generally take a lot of effort to put financing in place. And
but you've got all these tremendous financiers.
Fortunately, because of our track record, we have a lot of goodwill from the financial institutions. But even then, to prepare for the project and to bring the project to financial close, it still takes a bit of time. Some of these DFIs come through government or require government guarantees if KenGen is borrowing directly, and that does require quite a bit of negotiation and it. So generally speaking, the whole issue about financing projects really occupies our minds, and we have to keep thinking of it and looking. And of course, even the financiers have appetites for different projects.
Yes.
So you have to get them interested. You have to keep talking to them. You have to show them what it is that that you have to ensure that it's aligned with what they are also trying to do. That is one another issue and challenge that keeps coming from time to time. And perhaps you've read this in the papers, is the whole fact that dealing with communities has increasingly become a challenge in Kenya, whether it is Ketrako getting waylifts or right-of-way for their lines, which affect our projects because, as we mentioned, for example, the wellheads were not able to give enough production because the transmission capacity was not enough. And even in our case, getting land for our power plant or to go to new areas where we want to drill geothermal, it requires a lot of effort to negotiate with landowners, the communities that are living there. So it occupies quite a bit of our time, and in a sense you can say that it's a challenge. The good news is we have a good model of engaging with the communities. Of course, if the land was ours and we didn't have to take the time, it would quicken things a bit. But we found a way of engaging with them. We also interact with the different ministries and counties to help us with that. We have, for example, a weed project in Meru, which has slowed down because of the community issues, because the land was not adjudicated, the owner was not clear. So currently we are working with the Ministry of Lands to have the land adjudication take place so that people can get titles, and then we can negotiate with each of the title holders for the lease for the land so that we can have our wind turbine stand there. But it takes a lot of time.
No, I can imagine.
Yes.
And let me leave you with one final question, Albert. We've known each other a while, and I think we both share an interest in churches, I've discovered too when I was visiting in the UK. What do you want your legacy to be, Albert?
Okay. Well, I've been in this sector now for quite a bit of time. As a matter of fact, it's slightly over 35 years. And my time is coming to an end. I've been very, very excited about projects. And as I leave later in the year, one of the things I feel very happy about is growing through the sector, at one time being involved in the planning, of projects, seeing times when this country went through very serious problems because they did not have electricity. I think to be at that point where I'm associated with big projects that have been able to provide power so that today we can say the country has got enough power. We don't have to think about power rationing, even when we have drought. For me, that has been a great thing. And if anybody wants to think of me, can associate me with being at a time when we're able to stabilize the power in this nation so that there's no more power shortage. I also want to really be able for people to say there was a man who worked well with the team that he had and was able to build people who can continue in a good focus to ensure that whatever we've started together, like the projects that are just starting this year, which I'm very excited to leave about 3 or 4 good projects under implementation.
You're adding about 753 megawatts over the next 5 years.
In the next 5 years. To be able to see those projects come to an end properly, even after I'm out of the company, I think I'll be looking back and smiling and saying, no, that was a good thing that we started these projects together, and I have no fear in my mind that they will stall, but that they will continue to a logical conclusion.
Thank you so much, Albert, and we really appreciate your efforts. And thank you for the explanation around the results, and we look forward to the full year results.
Okay, thank you very much. And
thank you.
We are very excited, and we know the second half will be much better than the first half.
We're confident of that as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Asante.